Hello, everyone, and welcome to History with Mystery. This is our last lecture of the year, and to be quite honest, it is a relief that I don't have to talk at a computer anymore. But it is really sad that we didn't get any further than we're getting in our book. And I really miss you guys to being in class. I miss sitting next to Andrew, and the dulcet tones of his snoring as he sleeps through 2/3 of every class. I miss being embarrassed every time I mention something stupid about Germany because I'm just not that well informed. And Kiara's sitting there going, "What's wrong with this guy?" Um, I miss Madison and Trevor sitting in the other end of the classroom just waiting for class to be over. Oh no, I know how much you guys love history and never want that class to end. I miss sitting in lunch every day going, "Okay, time to go to history," and Trevor going, "Oh, I hate history." I miss talking about Chrysalis and other cults with with our high school students, even if Chrysalis isn't a cult. But I really hope to see you guys next year in August, and hopefully a few times over the summer too. Maybe we'll be able to have a board game day somewhere that's nice and air conditioned, or have a school picnic, um, or something fun like that. I hope you guys are doing well, and let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the aftermath of World War II. This is 27.6. 60 million people died worldwide in World War II. 400,000 Americans. Millions more were wounded. Europe again, as in the aftermath of World War I, Europe was flattened in ruins. Russia took a ton of damage and was in disarray, although they were growing with power every moment. Japan was flattened. Two of their cities completely destroyed off the face of the earth. Their people were starving. And America was forced to occupy Japan. As a result of the war, Douglas MacArthur moved in. And also, we found out about the Holocaust pretty much after World War II. Hitler had tried to exterminate 11 million European Jews, which he called subhumans. Now, I want to preface this with something. Knowing some German people, like Kiara and Leo and Talita and some other people I've met in the past, I want you guys to know that this wasn't the wishes of the German people, especially modern Germans nowadays. They had nothing to do with the war. There's almost nobody left alive that fought in World War II. So we don't ever need to cast blame on anybody that we know for a war that happened, 75 that ended 75 years ago. We're fortunate to get to know the likes of Leo and Ellen, Talita and Kiara, and other ethnic German people, to know about their culture and to know their perspective on this terrible war, and how their country has changed since then. So we will not judge the modern, our contemporary German friends by what happened 75 years or longer ago. Remember that, everybody. I know that sounds silly to even mention, but it needs to be mentioned. Especially when talking about the Holocaust. Hitler was consumed by hatred of the Jews, hatred after having lost World War II. Hitler thought that the Jews were trying to keep what he called the Aryan race. from achieving their full potential as a master race. He was a madman, people. He wrote in his book, partial biography, partial philosophy of the Nazi Party, Mein Kampf, that the Aryan race was destined to bring about all human progress, and to do so, they should enslave and in some cases eliminate lower races. One of which, primarily of which, or which he considered the Jewish people. He called it social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, even in society. When Hitler came to power, he began a systematic, yet very secret, government program of denying Jewish people their civil rights, allowing mob violence against Jewish people, which was called pogroms, or organized persecutions and massacres of Jewish people. And in 1941, he stripped away all rights from the Jewish people. The Jews were rounded up and enslaved, shot, or sent to ghettos, and then finally prison camps, also known as concentration camps. And they were in Germany, Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Belgium, parts of Russia, and France, these camps. 3 of the main camps, and I know 2 of which were in Poland. The three main camps were Dachau, Treblinka, and Auschwitz. If you ever tour in Europe, I think you can still go and visit Auschwitz prison camp. If you're ever looking for a terrific book filled with hope, but also filled with a very vivid description of German prison camps, look up The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, Corrie-Ten-Boom, Corrie ten Boom, The Hiding Place. She was a Hollander, a Dutch woman that had gone to the prison camp for hiding Jews in her house. She and her sister and much of her family were sentenced to prison camp. And after she miraculously survived the camps, she wrote that book and ministered throughout the world. Ministered a message of forgiveness and peace through Christ. The efficiency of the German bureaucracy made swift work of the genocide of the Jews. They were led by Hermann Goering, or Goring, I don't know how to pronounce a lot of these names, Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Eichmann, and Rudolf Hess. At these camps, the Jews were taken from their train cars and divided into 2 groups, healthy and sickly. The healthy Jews, after having their gold teeth removed and their possessions and valuables taken from them, were worked to death in the prison camps, starved and worked, enslaved. And the sickly, after having their gold teeth and clothing removed, were typically taken to gas chambers or laboratories, and the ones that went to gas chambers were gassed, put into large, long buildings, told them they were going to be showered and cleaned, and then they poured poisonous gas into these rooms where they suffered painfully and died. And then they were burned or placed into massive graves. 6 million Jews and up to 6 million other European ethnic peoples were killed in the Holocaust. Another interesting but awful movie, and quite an R-rated movie. So, also The Hiding Place. They made a great movie of The Hiding Place, not only a book, but is Schindler's List. You would have to ask your parents' permission to watch that movie. It's R-rated. It's very long. It's incredibly sad. I guarantee, will make you cry by the end of it. it's a brilliant example of life during that part of during the Holocaust. There's other scary and terrible movies, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and many others that talk about the horrors of the Holocaust. I don't make a habit of ever watching them anymore because it's too depressing. I have some German heritage. I also have some Jewish heritage, and it leaves much to be desired to be reminded over and over that I could possibly have had, ancestry that took part in this. I mean, it was very terrible, and we're just brushing the surface of enslavement and murder. They were experimented on by brutal, vicious doctors, killed wholesale, forced into hard work. And when they were finally liberated by U.S. troops at the very end of the war, these people were barely holding on to their humanity. After the war, they held trials from 1945 to 1949 of Nazi leaders. These were held in Nuremberg, Germany, led by a Russian judge. Many were convicted of war crimes, but very few were actually executed or imprisoned. They're still trying to hunt down Nazi leaders. The Nazis also robbed Europe of great artworks. They just emptied out museum after museum, collection after collection, home after home. One of the greatest pieces of art of all time, the Amber Room, was stolen from Russia. You should look up a YouTube documentary on it or something sometime. The Amber Room. During the war, we held 11 different conferences with the Allies to strategize post-war plans. The big three during the war, of course, were Stalin, the leader of Russia, FDR, the leader of the United States, and Churchill, the leader of England. They met in Tehran. They met in Yalta. That's the big conference. FDR made several concessions to the communists. By the time we were at Yalta in 1945, in February 1945, Britain was so tired from fighting the war, they left the fight against the communists, basically seizing all of Europe. After the war, there's a massive power vacuum. They left America to defend Europe. And FDR was weak. And he actually had communist, one of his advisors turned out to be a communist who was helping Russia. And they forced all kinds of concessions. Of course, we had also supplied Russia with massive amounts of war materials and machinery before and during the war. So Russia was incredibly strong at the end of World War II. We had the Potsdam Conference, which we talked about last time, in summer of 45, and that made plans for occupation of Germany. We formed the UN in 1942 on January 1st. 26 Allied powers formed the United Nations. By 1945, 21 more nations had joined. 1,600 delegates and assistants from 50 nations met on April 12th, 45 in San Francisco and made a charter and adopted the charter in June 26, 1945, and they set up the UN in New York City. It has a General Assembly to meet at least once a year, make recommendations on international problems and to the Security Council, and they vote balanced between each country. And then there's the UN Security Council, 15 members, 5 of which are permanent, 10 of which are elected in 2-year terms. Permanent members have veto power. It took 9 to pass a vote, and all 5 of the permanent members had to approve that vote. And the UN began to do international policy. President Clinton and President Obama were obsessed with the UN. They would do anything the UN told them to do. Jimmy Carter was the same way. Other Americans and other world leaders that stand up to the UN are never popular, but we cannot let the UN force policies on our country. We've also, it was a UN forces that fought in the Korean War and in Vietnam. UN forces, but mostly American troops. We formed the UN Economic and Social Council, the UNESCO. We formed a World Bank out of the UN. The World Health Organization came out of the UN. There's even a permanent staff at the UN, led by the Secretary General. The UN fails, though, because it causes divisions in the free world, the communist world, and the Afro-Asian third world. It's bad policy. So things were a mess on the world level after World War II. And of course, Germany fell apart and was overrun. Half of Germany went to the Russians, and half of it was defended by the United States and kept free. Anything east, basically, of Berlin fell to Russian influence and became part of the Soviet Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and suffered until 1989 when the USSR fell apart and released all these nations to do their own thing and become capitalist countries. Anything west of Berlin became successful European nations and was supported by, of course, each other and by the world and by the United States until they redeveloped into strong countries again. I wish we had time to talk about the Cold War. I wish we had time to talk about all of this other stuff, the rest of the 20th century. I'm really sorry that the year ends in this way, but I loved being your teacher this year. I don't know if you loved my class, and that doesn't really matter at this point because it's over. But it was a real privilege.